Some of the structures in ancient Egypt are far older. There are some structures that are far, far older than we think.
From seeing mummies running around in movies to people resurrecting from the dead, I have always wondered what goes on behind the scenes in Egypt. It won't be wrong to say that ancient Egypt is like the original X-Files with all that drama going on, and that gives people an open invitation to share their theories about it. And trust me folks, Mulder and Scully would have a field day with these theories, so grab your papyrus scrolls and let's embark on a journey through the craziest rabbit holes history has to offer.
These ancient clay vessels that show clear evidence of some sort of psychedelic that was mixed in with wine.
Because today, I'm your Indiana Jones of absurd historical hypotheses, and these are the craziest ancient Egypt theories in Joe Rogan history. Let's get started. Sphinx built before ancient Egyptians. There is absolutely no doubt about the fact that Egypt's vast history records have always made up a big chunk of the overall world's history. But how much of it is actually true? And did the Egyptians themselves deserve credit for all the miracles of Egyptian history, or was there a civilization before them who was behind it all? I mean, the Sphinx is said to have been built by the ancient Egyptians, but what if that's not true? Even if you haven't been to Egypt, I'm sure you can still tell how massive the Sphinx actually is just by looking at pictures. And if you're as curious as I am, you must have also wondered how people from ancient civilizations got around to even constructing these massive structures with no machinery or technology. Well, there is a conspiracy theory that the famous Sphinx might have been built even before the ancient Egyptians.
Just the way it looks, the feel of the Sphinx, that maybe it was older than the pyramids, that maybe it goes back earlier.
Before them? Wouldn't that be super, super old? But what exactly is the supporting argument for an assumption like this? If you look at the Sphinx, it is obvious that it has suffered from severe water erosion. I am sure you're wondering what water erosion has to do with how far back the construction of the Sphinx goes. Well, for meticulous scientists and historians, things like these are essential in digging up some crucial facts. The kind of water erosion the Sphinx has been subjected to hasn't been experienced in Egypt for a long time. To be precise, the Nile Valley hasn't experienced this kind of water erosion for the past 12,500 years. Yes, you heard that right. But it was possible in the time when the Sahara was supposedly green. According to some scientists, this erosion of the Sphinx can be dated back to the Younger Dryas. Historical records define the Younger Dryas as a period when there were severe heavy rains in Africa. Young and heavy rains are definitely not two words that you would associate with Egypt on a normal day. And as you might have guessed, these heavy rains could have subsequently led to the erosion of the Sphinx.
The Sphinx had been weathered by rain, I would say precipitation. So this, if it were true, would put the Sphinx back to a much earlier period.
While this may just be a theory, Robert Schoch has coined a term for this kind of erosion, which is precipitation-induced weathering. To elaborate further on his term, precipitation-induced weathering is caused when something is subjected to heavy rainfall for thousands of years. And these thousands of years of rainfall have been precisely mapped within the Younger Dryas. Now, just so you know, the Younger Dryas was about 11 to 12,000 years ago. This means the Egyptologists have been making false claims about the Sphinx being only 4,000 years old. Only 4,000 years? Sounds a little strange, doesn't it? But hey, can you blame me? Compare it to something that's 12,500 years old, and you'll see what I mean. Then again, there could also be the possibility that Egyptians found the Sphinx in 2500 BC, but by this time, it was already in shambles. What then? Taking their fondness for massive structures into account, they must have carved the pharaoh's face on the Sphinx. And if that's the case, I have to say, these people were pretty creative. Advanced technology. We are the generation with the most advanced technology, right? Well, not if you think like Joe Rogan. According to Rogan, one of the most plausible explanations for all the awe-inspiring structures that ancient Egyptians made was that they had access to some advanced technology. And no, he didn't mean advanced in terms of the 2500 BC, because then he'd just be referring to smartphones or computers. What Rogan actually meant was that the ancient Egyptians knew something that we still haven't discovered. Sounds mysterious, right? But then again, there is nothing about the ancient Egyptians that does not sound mysterious. Joe believes that these people had some kind of technology that enabled them to build pyramids, tombs, and statues without much difficulty.
Through this technology, they're able to move stones or cut stones or all the above.
Whatever the Egyptians were doing, I think they were the most advanced civilization that ever existed.
If I am being honest with you, for the sake of ancient Egyptians, I hope this is the truth, because I cannot imagine how painstakingly they must have carved all those stones. And if that wasn't enough, they would then have to carry them and place them on top of gigantic structures. All this only with the help of basic tools like chisels. How does that even happen? Yes, there are theories about the upper blocks being light in weight, but still it's not like they were made out of styrofoam, right? Psychedelics and psychic powers. I know you might be thinking I'm crazy for even thinking about the psychic powers, but hear me out. We all know there's very little to no explanation regarding how the Egyptians created those massive pyramids. Almost all explanations have their loopholes and sound a little absurd. I mean, just take a look at the King's Chamber. The pyramid happens to have 5 roofed and floored chambers in it towards the top, and 70-ton granite beams support each chamber. Can you imagine what building that would be like? An elephant usually weighs around a few tons. Now, imagine trying to get hundreds of beams that weigh around 30 to 40 elephants each to the top of a pyramid. Sounds insane, doesn't it? You might think there is always a mathematical and physics-backed explanation for this. But trust me when I tell you even science seems to fall short when it comes to providing an explanation for this. Archaeological findings suggest that in order to carry a beam of that weight, you need to create a slope at 10 degrees. But can you imagine how tall the slope must have been to reach the top of the pyramid? And okay, for 1 second, even if we believe that they used a slope or a pulley system of sorts, where are the remains of this slope? I am sure they did not create a slope out of light or sound that just disappeared after they were done building the pyramids. Let's not forget that I'm talking about a civilization whose intellect still baffles everyone to date. They wouldn't have created a slope out of sand. Then how did they do it all? Well, one of Joe Rogan's theories has explained this too. After finding no theory without its flaws, be it leverage, mechanics, physics, or anything else, there is only one way left to explain this, and that is psychic powers. He believes that these people had some psychic powers that they used for doing all the work. Psychic powers, as in telekinetic powers. So yes, he has proposed this theory, and honestly, I kind of believe in it.
A simple compound found throughout nature which has profound effects on human consciousness.
Clear evidence of some sort of psychedelic that was mixed in with wine.
There might be a possibility that through the power of psychedelics and strengthening their psychic powers, these ancient Egyptians were able to make those magnificent pyramids. Man, I wish I could unlock the true potential of my brain through psychedelics too. Only if it were that easy. Power of sound and frequency. Now, I think Joe and his fellas are kind of obsessed with the ancient Egyptians. Like, how can a guy have so many theories about them? He believes that the construction of the pyramids also has some hidden truth behind it. Keeping in line with Joe Rogan's theory of ancient Egyptians possessing some sort of advanced technology, his friend also came up with a similar theory. So what's the theory? Well, according to Joe Rogan's friend, the ancient Egyptians, owing to their high intellect, knew about sound and frequency too.
Yell at it.
I know you are probably going to say, hey, even I know about sound and frequency. But could you use your knowledge to make a whole pyramid out of stones and ordinary chisels? Well, apparently the theory states that these people had such a comprehensive knowledge of sound and its frequency that they used it to their maximum advantage. How? He states that they might have created sound at the right frequency to cut and lift these massive stones, which were used to create the pyramids.
Some thoughts have a certain sound, that being the equivalent to a form.
As absurd as it may sound, there might be some truth to this theory. After all, there is historical evidence that suggests that priests in the ancient Egyptian era would constantly chant while the stones were being lifted and placed. If this theory is true, I am sure it took a ton of priests to lift those heavy stones and granite beams. Egyptians' race. I'm sure there are a plethora of theories about ancient Egyptians, and most of them sound like they have been dug up from some really old book. But are all these theories equally absurd? Because some of them actually make more sense than others. One such theory that you might think is very different from what you usually hear is surrounding the race to which these Egyptians belong. Many have their disagreements, but this theory makes a lot of sense because of several factors. According to this theory, it's believed that the ancient Egyptians weren't actually white-skinned, but were black people. Now, first of all, it could be true because Egypt is an African country, and black people dominate Africa. It's simple math right there. Other than that, the traits of this civilization that historians and scientists have explained match some old black tribal civilizations as well. So this goes on to say that the Egyptians we meet today might not even be the original descendants of the ancient Egyptians. Instead, the actual ones probably moved somewhere else in Africa. Well, I guess there is some truth to this. An even older civilization. We have all heard of the Big Bang and how a meteor colliding with the Earth was what led to the extinction of dinosaurs. But is there a possibility that this might also hold the answer to the question regarding the construction of the pyramids? Another plausible theory that has come forward credits a non-existent civilization for the construction of the pyramids. This theory borders closely with the concept that the Younger Dryas is the real era when the Sphinx was built. It is suggested that people from before 2500 BC were responsible for making the pyramids. You must be thinking, if we do not have an explanation for people from 2500 BC being able to construct the pyramids, then how can we justify people from even before that being responsible for this? Well, a part of the theory is that this civilization was far more technologically advanced than the Egyptians and even us.
Hey, like this defies conventional explanation.
However, these supposed people were then subjected to mass extinction and were completely wiped out, leaving behind no remains of the technology that they had used. Only the buildings they built while they were still alive remain. Now, I wonder if it was a meteorite that hit these people, or an alien invasion. And honestly, I find it pretty ironic that the people who crafted such magnanimous stone structures were wiped out by a massive piece of stone hitting the earth in a matter of hours or maybe days. Hieroglyphics. If you didn't miss your history class, you must remember reading the chapter about how writing dates back to a whopping 5,500 years. With stone tablets from those times being found, some scientists tend to believe that civilizations started around this time. However, there's something that debunks this theory. Archaeologists have found proof of writing that can be dated back to over 30,000 years ago. But this is not the conventional writing that you see today. I am talking about hieroglyphs that Egyptians are highly famous for. These hieroglyphs found by archaeologists depict some characteristics of what life was like around 30,000 or more years ago for the ancient Egyptians.
There's hieroglyphs that depict a history of Egypt that goes back maybe even 30,000 plus years ago.
If there is one thing Egyptians deserve points for, it is their skill of preservation. From preserving mummies to preserving these hieroglyphics carved on pieces of stone, I think they deserve some appreciation. What is even more commendable is the work of the archaeologists who have found these remains and then made sense of them. Obviously, there are always several schools of thought, and when it comes to things like this, we have the conventional and non-conventional archaeologists who have their opinions. The conventional ones, like many non-archaeologists, tend to dismiss this theory completely and refer to it as completely hypothetical. However, a group of non-conventional archaeologists have laid their foundation in the Younger Dryas impact theory. Yes, this is the same Younger Dryas I previously talked about. The non-conventional archaeologists believe that these hieroglyphics can be credited to the people belonging to the Younger Dryas. Like many things from their civilization, the people were also completely wiped out by common impacts. However, different things from their time have been left behind, which continues to confuse scientists, historians, and archaeologists collectively. I wonder if the theory is true and if these hieroglyphics are the work dating back to the Younger Dryas. Drilling holes. Yes, I know what you are probably going to say. For a civilization that has built pyramids, drilling holes must have been a piece of cake. I know, right? What's so special about drilling holes? But in reality, there is a lot more to drilling holes than you and I can comprehend from a quick glance. The holes that I'm talking about right now are no ordinary ones. These are precise, sharply cut, and equal-sized holes that are found in different remains that have been spotted in Egypt. In fact, there is a place in Egypt that you might not have heard of called Abusir. Abusir has been closed off to the public, but it happens to be the remains of an old kingdom. And if you are ever lucky enough to get special permission to go to Abusir, you will come across sights that will astonish you. Throughout this ancient kingdom, you will see multiple massive circular saws, holes that have been cut with precision and have clear machine markings on them. Mind you, I am talking about a kingdom that is over 4,000 years old, a time when drill machines and other mechanical inventions had not yet been invented. In addition to these massive holes, there are also very thin and intricate holes. You cannot tell me that a person with a chisel can carve such precise holes. There's got to be some other explanation for it. The mundane mind would think of drill machines, but as I already said, these holes date back to over 4,000 years ago, so there is no way drill machines would have been used. So what explains this? Well, just like the placement of the granite beams and the massive blocks of stones, there is a plausible theory that the civilization that crafted this old kingdom had access to some advanced technology. Not only that, but there are tube drills that were found there, and they range from anything between 1/2 inch to 9 inches. Just like the name suggests, these were drills, shaped like tubes with plugs at the bottom, which could be snapped off once the hole had been dug. These tube drills were first discovered by Flinders Petrie through the application of the basic principles of engineering. If you go to Petrie's museum, you can even find a tube drill that has been fashioned out of granite. While it took our civilization eons to figure out things, people in ancient Egypt had already cracked the code to several things that we struggled with. It's safe to say these people were engineering geniuses and knew exactly what they were doing. But the question about those holes and their purpose remains unanswered because nothing about them makes sense. Not yet, at least. Advanced mining tools. Before I dive into this next theory, do you know what an obelisk is? Obelisks are those massive stone pillars that can be seen in many different places in Egyptian archaeological sites. Much like everything else from ancient Egypt, the remains of obelisks have also caused quite the conspiracy. Those massive pillars with detailed carvings look like something you can only imagine being made using a 3D printer or very powerful machines. But the problem is, none of these things were available back in that time. And if that wasn't enough, these obelisks were also made out of granite, which is pretty heavy and super difficult to carve by hand. Not just that. The granite that they have used is not just any ordinary type of granite. I am talking about granite that you have to dig 30 or 40 feet to get to. And mind you, it is as solid as a rock. One can't even fathom how these people managed to dig through the solid land and find such high-quality granite. And most importantly, how on earth did they even figure out where these stones could be found? Anyways, the theory actually states that the ancient Egyptians had some advanced tools that helped them carve all those astonishing designs in granite. You have to admit it is kind of amusing how, despite being so ancient, these Egyptians tend to surprise us with almost everything they did. If you were to go to Giza or Aswan, you can actually try to bang away at these obelisks, and I assure you the most you will be able to do is chip off a very minor edge. Then, how did they do it? Either these people possessed some superhuman power that made them capable of moving these massive pieces of stones, or they really had access to something that we are missing out on. There are tests that suggest that in order to remove just 70 or 50 cubic centimeters of these blocks, you would have to spend a good 1 hour chipping away at the rock. If you are still having trouble comprehending the scale of this, it is equivalent to 75% of the volume of a golf ball. With that speed, even if you had a group of thousands of people working simultaneously, this would still not amount to a lot. So I wonder if they had some sort of sonic tool that could rotate and soften the foundations of granite. I guess the wonders of ancient Egypt just seem to have no limit to them, and even the wackiest and most impractical explanations might be true. A trip to the Grand Canyon. In today's world, if you're planning a vacation, you might have the Grand Canyon on your list. Well, it turns out that there is a theory that suggests that even the ancient Egyptians visited the Grand Canyon. According to a paper published in the 1900s, there is substantial evidence that suggests the Egyptians left their mark at the Grand Canyon too. I would honestly not be surprised if someone told me these Egyptians walked all the way to the Grand Canyon with blocks of granite on their shoulders. Some artifacts that trace back to the ancient Egyptian civilization were found in Ohio and Cincinnati. A brass amulet, which could only be found in ancient Egypt, was spotted in Cincinnati. One theory suggests that this could be because Ohio might have been used as a trade route. However, another very strong theory that links the ancient Egyptian civilization to the Grand Canyon is the fact that it is also called the sandstone capital of the world.
Lost civilization in Grand Canyon was, Egyptian? Could there have been an entire civilization of Egyptians living here? If so, how did they get here?
That area in Ohio also is known as the sandstone capital of the world, because that's what the pyramids are made out of, you know.
Considering how the pyramids are made from sandstone, it's possible that the ancient Egyptians actually visited the Grand Canyon to get their hands on the stone itself. One could say that there might be some truth to this theory because the evidence is there. In fact, the object that was spotted in Cincinnati bore a very uncanny resemblance to the carvings we find in Egypt. This is why many even state that it's possible that the last ancient civilizations that lived in Ohio and Cincinnati were also actually ancient Egyptians. In contrast, others argue that it was simply just a weird coincidence. But if I were asked, I would go with the former because there's no denying the fact that ancient Egyptian stuff was found in these areas. I mean, it is not that uncommon for civilizations to travel to different countries, and there is so much about ancient Egyptians that it is a big question mark and only sounds like a far-fetched theory. Many argue that it was impossible for them to travel to such faraway lands without any third-party help. Now, by third party, they mean vehicles, airplanes, or advanced ships. But what if they actually had some technology for that too? I mean, if they could build pyramids, traveling would have been a piece of cake. Well, folks, that's a wrap on another wild ride through the sands of time. I hope you enjoyed diving into the depths of ancient Egypt's craziest theories with me. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and comment below to let me know what crazy conspiracy theories you want me to crack next. Until then, keep questioning, keep exploring, and never stop digging for the truth, no matter how buried it may be. See you in the next one.